Colorful Plants, a science fair project by Matt Zahan, Sean Batty, and Leslie Peterson. Our question for this science fair project is, how is water transported from the roots throughout plants? The materials we used to explore this were 4 clear glasses, tap water, red food coloring, and celery bunches with leaves. To begin our science fair project, we started by filling each glass with 3/4 cups of tap water. We then added 20 drops of red food coloring to 2 of the cups of water. The glasses that we left without food coloring were used as the control. We then selected 4 stalks from the innermost part of the celery bunch. We cut the bottom of those stalks at an angle and placed each stalk in a glass. We then left the celery overnight to see what would happen. The next day, we examined and noticed that the differences between the stalks that were left in clear water versus the stalks that were left in the red food coloring. We cut cross-section of the celery to see how the food coloring affected the inside of the stalk. What we found is that the leaves of the celery stalks that were left in the clear water looked pretty much exactly the same as when we bought them. They were still green, while the leaves of the celery stalks left in the food coloring had red spots all over them. The cross sections that we cut showed a single row of small red dots near the surface, and those red dots had been colored from the food coloring. You can see them in this picture down here on the bottom left. There's a nice row of red dots just under the surface of the celery stalk. So we got a pretty cool result from our celery stalks, and now we want to see if this is something that would happen with all plants. So in order to do that, we basically did the same experiment, but instead of using celery, we did it with daisies. So we filled 3 glasses with 3/4 cups of water. We added 20 drops of red food coloring to one glass, 20 drops of blue food coloring to another glass, and we left 1 clear as a control. We placed a flower in the control glass, a flower in the red glass, and a flower in the blue glass. And then we also took a flower and split the stem lengthwise and placed half of the stem in the blue water and half of the stem in the red water. We then let the flower sit for 48 hours to see what would happen. The results we got from this experiment were basically the same as what we saw in the celery experiment. The petals of the flowers in the blue water have blue spots, the petals of the flower in the red water have red spots, and the petals of the split stem flowers have red and blue spots. Here's some pictures of the flowers after 48 hours. You can see the blue spots and the red spots on the flowers. It wasn't as dramatic as what we saw with the celery, but you can clearly see that the flowers were stained with blue and red food coloring. So why did this happen? We found out through some investigation that the water rose through small structures that all plants have called xylem tubes. The red food coloring from our celery experiment stained those xylem tubes, which is why we saw those red dots. The xylem tubes transport sap, which is liquid in plants, from the roots to the leaves of the plants. So essentially water is absorbed from the soil through the roots, it's transported through the xylem tubes up to the leaves, and then evaporates from the leaves. Transpiration is a process by which moisture is carried through the plants from the roots to the small pores on the underside of the leaves, where it changes into vapor and is released into the atmosphere. So when the water evaporates from the plant's leaves, more water is pulled in through the roots to keep the xylem full. It's basically like a long straw, just sucking water from the roots all the way up to the leaves. So what did we learn from this experiment? We learned that water is transported from the roots through small vessels called xylem tubes. As water evaporates from the leaves, more water is pulled into the xylem tubes to keep them full. We clearly saw that in our experiment when we saw those red dots on the celery stalk. Those are the xylem tubes being stained red from the food coloring. We also saw the spotted leaves, which show that water moves from the roots up to the leaves. We think this is a great project to do in a classroom to explain the process of transpiration to students. You can have your students do this experiment, let them explore the celery and see the xylem tubes, and then have the students investigate further using the internet. Your students are going to learn about transpiration, xylem tubes, and the structures of plants. Here are the sources we used for this project. We got the idea for the project from a book called Science Fair Projects, and then we used the internet to explore further. Thank you for taking the time to listen to our Science Fair project. Hopefully you enjoyed yourself, and we hope you learned something.